justices. Joining me now, RNC National Spokesperson and Director of Black Media Affairs, Paris Dennard. Paris, good morning.
Good morning.
The Democrat reaction kind of tells you everything that you need to know. This was a huge loss, and they are pouting over it.
There's no mistake about it. This was a huge loss to the Democrat Party. The DNC failed to show one instance where the ban on ballot harvesting, the partisan measure that allows partisan hacks to go door to door by paid and collect ballot, disenfranchised or made sure that any minority voter in the state of Arizona, where my family has been for over 50 years, was discriminated against. The Supreme Court said you all did not prove your case, and there's no instance of that happening. You can uphold the fact that ballot harvesting is the law of the land in Arizona, and that's a good thing for the American people. That's why the RNC was so aggressive in supporting the Arizona GOP and has been on the front lines of the issue of election integrity, because this is something that we have got to get right moving forward for future generations of people who want to make sure that when they vote, it's easy, but it's also hard to cheat.
It was the Arizona law. It's a ban on counting provisional ballots if they're cast in person in the wrong precinct, and then a ban on ballot harvesting,
right,
which stops activist groups from collecting and handling other people's mail-in ballots. These laws in Arizona are common across many states, but still this challenge went all the way to the Supreme Court.
It is common, and this is the thing that we should take note of. The Arizona Republican Party, working with the RNC, was able to uphold this and say you can have a prohibition on ballot harvesting, and it forced people to vote in their precincts. What this means is across the country, when we look at these other states that tried to codify these laws that were put in place because of COVID-19, they're trying to make sure that the Democrats can control the process, control the vote, and federalize our election systems. We now have precedent, and I hope that this is just the catalyst for other states and attorney generals to work to make sure that ballot harvesting and these other draconian measures that these Democrats are putting in place to federalize local elections are prevented from happening.
As the National Review writes, the editors there, about both of the decisions yesterday, a good day for free speech and free elections, Paris, they write this: federal law was never intended to put every state in the union in a permanent straitjacket to the point where even temporary emergency voting rules adopted to manage a once-in-a-century pandemic can never be revisited. I want to ask you about this op-ed that you have out titled "People Are Flocking to the Republican Party." What are you seeing in terms of broadening the base? What are the issues that are really driving people to the GOP?
Yeah, in my op-ed that I wrote for the Carolinian newspaper, I talk about what the Indiana GOP is doing. They have a diversity initiative, a leadership series, where they are training and equipping the next generation of minority Republicans to go into their communities, run for office, and lead. This is something that we're seeing across the country. And I think it's a good thing because there are issues that are uniting minority communities around good, sound policies that are in line with the Republican Party. That's why we are so engaged in minority engagement at the Republican National Committee. Issues like school choice, issues like opportunity zones, criminal justice reform, things that are empowering and uplifting the black community and minority communities across the country. And they're looking at the contrast between what they see right now with the Democrats: rising inflation, gas prices out of control, and they see that the schools were shut down and that prevented people from going back to work. They see the difference between how it was with President Trump and Republicans and how it is with Democrats controlling everything. And more people are coming to the Republican Party that look like me. That's why the RNC's just opened up our APA Engagement Community Center out in Little Saigon in California. And the chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, made a $2 million commitment to reopen the black community centers across the country in target states this summer. We are serious about engagement, and the Democrats are afraid because they know our messaging is working. When you talk about defunding the police, the black community knows exactly what that means. That means means leaving us vulnerable to crime, violence, and murder. And that's exactly what you see in these rising crime across the country, in these Democrat-controlled cities.
And that is why you see this stench of desperation coming from the Democrats about trying to blame Republicans for defunding the police, because they are suggesting that the Republicans who didn't vote for the $1.9 trillion in COVID relief, that was a vote against police funding. And I'll just point out what Karl Rove yesterday, and this is from Jen Psaki, Cedric Richmond, the senior presidential advisor, said something similar on Fox News Sunday. But the flaw in these attacks, as Karl Rove wrote, is over 98% of local police and corrections outlays are funded by cities, counties, and states, not by Washington, not by the federal government. And Democratic mayors and city councils are defunding law enforcement, period. Like here in New York City, and not a single major city with a Republican mayor and council has cut its police budget. Not one city, unlike Chicago. Now Mayor Lori Lightfoot is saying 99% of her critics are motivated by two things: racism and sexism. This comes during an interview to discuss the city's recent surge in violence and those criticizing her leadership efforts. So again, when you can't defend your policies and have no way of stopping people from getting shot and murdered in your streets, you blame racism and sexism, Paris.
It's a cheap tactic of the left. The Democrats are doing it time and time again because they are afraid of the inroads and engagement efforts that the Republican National Committees and Republicans across the country are having with minority communities. Let's be very clear. It is a lie. Jen Psaki, Cedric Richmond, all of these people who are saying that about what Democrats or Republicans are somehow not defunding the police, it's wrong. Be very clear. Democrats are defunding the police. City councils across the country, mayors, Democrats defunding the police. And they do this cheap thing of blaming everything on race. Everything is not about race. That's why the DNC lost this case in the Supreme Court, because they tried to insert race into it. That's absurd. The American people are not stupid, and the Democrats think that we are. And minority community are waking up to this fact.
Indeed, Paris, really quickly, and also the just issue of being able to protect yourself and exercise your Second Amendment rights. I'll point to the San Jose City Council. San Jose is the wealthiest city in the nation by some measures, and they want to impose insurance on gun ownership. If you don't buy insurance for your gun, they're going to come and confiscate it, and you also have to pay a fee. So that message is, rich people can own guns, but if you are working class, if you're a lower income or middle income American living in maybe an inner part of a city, you're not. We're going to basically tax you to the point that we're going to make it more expensive to own a gun. If you want to talk about Jim Crow, that's it. And it's straight from the liberals in California.
Absolutely. You go back to slavery, they tried to keep black people stupid by preventing us to read, and they wanted to keep us defenseless by not allowing us to have weapons. And that's exactly what you're seeing now. And that was with Democrats back then, and these draconian laws and federal government policies that are wrong. They're doing it today. They don't want us to have school choice. They want to keep us dumb. And when you look at the issue of protecting ourselves, why can't black people be allowed to have weapons to protect ourselves? Because we're under siege in these urban communities by the failure of Democrat parties not doing what they need to do to protect us. And this taxes on weapons is just another attempt to keep it out of the hands of the minority communities and keeping us unsafe. It's a shame. Democrats are just shameful in their policies and how they attack the black community.
I want the Republicans to make every Democrat who is up for re-election in the midterms on the record about what they think about that, and it's going to backfire. Paris Dennard, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Have a terrific weekend. Coming up in America.